So talking about this meeting, what is being said that is currently in China, it's almost after 9 years that this is the second state visit of President Trump, and saying President Xi has made a strong pitch for cooperation between Beijing and Washington amid the ongoing global tensions. Now, the president of China says that cooperation benefits both nations, while confrontation only causes harm, calling for greater stability in the world order. He stressed that China and the United States should be partners first and not rivals, and has asserted that common interests outweigh existing differences. Now, the Chinese president also said that stable China-US relations are important for global peace and economic stability.
Can we meet global challenges together and provide more stability for the world? Can we, in the interests of the well-being of our two peoples and the future of humanity, build a brighter future together for our bilateral relations? These are the questions vital to history, to the world, and to the people. They are the questions of our times that you and I need to answer as leaders of major countries. I always believe that our two countries have more common interests than differences. China and the United States both stand to gain from cooperation and lose from confrontation. We should be partners, not rivals. We should help each other succeed and prosper together and find the right way for major countries to get along well with each other in the new era.
Now let's listen into what President Trump has to say, because he struck a warm note on ties with China, projecting optimism over future relations with Beijing. President Trump says that the United States has shared a fantastic relationship with China and described Chinese President Xi as a great leader and a good friend. He's claimed that both sides have managed to work through every major issue, signaling confidence that the ties between Washington and Beijing will improve further.
Well, President Xi, I want to thank you very much. First of all, that was an honor like few have ever seen before. And I think I was particularly impressed by those children. They were happy. They were beautiful. The military is obvious. It couldn't be better, but those children were amazing, and they represent so much. And I know they represent so much to you. You and I have known each other now for a long time. In fact, the longest relationship of our two countries that any president and president has had. And that's, to me, an honor. We've had a fantastic relationship. We've gotten along. When there were difficulties, we worked it out. I would call you, and you would call me. And whenever we had a problem, people don't know, whenever we had a problem, we worked that out very quickly. We're going to have a fantastic future together.
So fantastic future together is something what President Trump is now looking forward to. Of course, there is a lot being planned in these 2 days of this meeting that was previously postponed, in March. But what we are now looking at, because the whole world is watching, and as far as the India point of view is concerned, let's take you through, because India's China's +1 advantage, that seems to be at stake. Of course, the good relations that India also shares with both sides. When we speak of Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific map, that also seems to be now in a way which is going to be addressed, because tariff trade, Taiwan seems to be the issues that President Trump would be raising. Of course, there is another issue of rare earths and global tech chains as well. That is also likely to be taken up. But when we talk about the tariff threat, because India's tariff edge continues to remain under threat, what happens now if there is any easing of tensions there? Then, of course, when it comes to the AI chip war and the tech geopolitics is also something that would be taken up. And India's strategic balancing test, that is something that is expected to be providing certain breakthroughs, if not big ones, but at least something that we are now expecting, good to come out of this meeting that is taking place between the two world leaders. Quickly introducing Srinjoy and Mayank on the broadcast. Good morning to both of you. So when, Srinjoy, we speak of breakthroughs, because there are several divisive issues, right, that range from Iran, from trade, technology, Taiwan. Now, what is necessary here is the stability in the relationship. That seems to be the main goal of this two-day summit.
Undoubtedly, first of all, Iran. When you look at Iran, you see how much China depends on Iran and Iranian oil. Of course, Iran and China are very close friends. And 13% of China's oil comes from Iran. 90% of Iran's oil exports go to China. So as a result, China is losing billions and billions of dollars every month and a year because of the war. And that is something that is hurting China considerably. That's really the first point. If the war ends, if there is a proper supply of petroleum to China, it helps China. The fact that the Venezuelan crisis also has hurt China has to be kept in mind, because China was importing Venezuelan oil at $30 a barrel, 500,000 barrels a day at $30 a barrel. And that has changed. China is having to buy expensive oil from Russia and Saudi Arabia. Now that will reflect in world prices, because China is the factory of the world, and China exports lots and lots of stuff to the world. And China is the world's largest exporter.
Yes.
America is the world's largest importer. Now, all these issues apart, there is the issue of strategic problems. Now, America has 3 allies in the area. There is Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. Now, they feel insecure because of Chinese aggression. And there is this problem with Taiwan.
Yes.
Now, America has issued some guidelines to Taiwan.
So are we looking those issues to be ironed out? Because this is something, 2 of the leaders, red carpet being rolled out for President Trump. We're looking at the great hall of the people. We're looking at sprawling ceremonial complex there. And in this motorcade, where senior members of the U.S. delegation, there is a big delegation of the U.S. businessmen and CEOs who are accompanying President Trump. But what are the key highlights there? Let's listen into both sides once again, what they said in their beginning notes.
You and I have known each other now for a long time. In fact, the longest relationship of our 2 countries that any president has had. And that's, to me, an honor. We've had a fantastic relationship. We've gotten along. When there were difficulties, we worked it out. I would call you, and you would call me. And whenever we had a problem, people don't know, whenever we had a problem, we worked it out very quickly. We're going to have a fantastic future together. But it's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be your friend. And the relationship between China and the USA is going to be better than ever before.
Welcome back to China after 9 years. The whole world is watching our meeting. Currently, transformation not seen in a century is accelerating across the globe, and the international situation is fluid and turbulent. The world has come to a new crossroads. Can China and the United States overcome the Thucydides trap and create a new paradigm of major country relations?
Well, Mayank, do you believe that the President Trump's visit to China since 2017 is also coming at a very politically sensitive moment for him, because his approval ratings have now hit, by the gross U.S. involvement in the Middle East as well. So how is that going to look upon?
See, if we pick up the words which have been spoken by the 2 sides, which is the 2 leaders, while Donald Trump, President, is highlighting about the long-term relationship, there's an important point which has been put in by President Xi Jinping while talking about the fluidity and the world being at the crossroads, and the 2 countries can have a very important relationship in that regard. So if you see from that perspective, it is definitely going to be a very significant talk. And for US specifically, the quagmire in West Asia is bringing a lot of indirect pressures on US. And there had been a term used, term called long talk. I mean, that has been used by President from the US side, that on Iran aspect, they'll be having a long talk. So which means that the overhang of Iran, as far as the rest of the things we are leaving for now, which is Taiwan and tariff is concerned. Specifically coming to West Asia, these things will decide a lot of things. And both sides, it can be presented in a sort of a win-win situation for both sides. Because once things get resolved, and as I use the term quagmire, US will be out of it. As of now, it is stuck. and naval blockade has been put in by the US side. Its navy is already working on that, and every side wants that it be removed, because the world over, its effect has gone past to every country, which includes India also. And
so
China
that would raise the question if China is now playing the role of a silent mediator. I think we'll be taking that up. Professor Swarn Singh is also joining us here on the broadcast. Good morning to you, sir. He's from the School of International Studies from the JNU. But a quick explainer, when we talk about exactly what is being expected from this wish list we are now looking at, especially when it comes to US and China summit. Now, the wish list of the two global powers being in India's neighborhood, the stability of US-China trade truce is something that has now been looked forward to, especially when it comes to ending the US tech export and the curbs there, and also a US rethink on Taiwan. This is something that the Chinese side can push for, and fewer US arms sales to Taiwan and wider American market access is also something that has been looked upon. Then we are now looking at the other side, what could be President Trump's wish list, because this is something that he has said before, that he was expecting a big fat hug from the Chinese president. Then, of course, when we talk about the agri-goods market, the access not to the US Boeing aircraft and the Chinese rare earth, access to also wider Chinese market entry is something that this is also what the US seems to be thinking, getting on these different divisive issues, what we are now looking at, ranging right from Iran to trade to technology and Taiwan. And stability in the relationship seems to be the main goal of this two-day summit.
Mr. President, I look forward to our discussions on major issues important to our two countries and the world, and working together with you to set the course for and steer the giant ship of China-US relations so as to make 2026 a historic landmark year that opens up a new chapter in China-US relations.
So, Professor Singh, good morning, sir. How are you reading as far as today's talks are concerned? Of course, the meetings that has been taking place, President Trump had hoped that China would actually use considerable of its leverage to prod Iran to agree with the US terms to end the 2-month-old war, with the Iranian foreign minister himself now being in India.
Absolutely. As your program has been detailing, both sides have their own, whether you call it wish list or compulsions. Fundamentally, the relationship in last 9 years, from the time when President Trump had last visited Beijing, has seen enormous new issues emerging as issues of tension. And now we have an entirely new issue of Iran between them, where, of course, Trump definitely wants to have, quote-unquote, long talk with President Xi Jinping, but also his Secretary of State, his Secretary of Treasury have also made statements saying that participation of China is expected. And in that sense, on Iran issue, apparently, when there is nothing is moving anymore now, as far as gains for United States are concerned, I think China holds an important card, but China also has compulsions. China has about 300 billion plus trade with Gulf countries, which is now under stress. It has very strong relationship. It has a 10-year strategic partnership cooperation with Iran, which is also important. It has investments, but more, it also imports about 90% of Iranian oil, which is exported to China.
Yes.
And in that sense, there is an enormous economic compulsion that China has. Plus, China also was emerging as a peacemaker in the region. If you remember March 2023, Saudi Arabia and Iran rapprochement that happened through Beijing, it is presenting itself as a regional peacemaker as well. So China has its own reasons why it would like to support exit strategy or face-saving exercise for President Trump to get out of Iran war, except that in doing that kind of favor, so to say, as it wants to present it, it would like to seek some concessions. And when it is seeking concessions, the most sensitive issue for Chinese is Taiwan issue, where in December, US had sanctioned $11 billion of arms exports.
So if not being involved directly, then in an indirect way, I mean, this is something that President Trump had sought China's help before when it comes to reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. That, however, did not happen. 2 months into the war, there is still no peace deal that has been reached. So does it mean when it comes to the critical Strait of Hormuz that still remains closed, But this seems to have tempered those calls ahead of this summit as far as President Trump's, in the way that he has been taking and acknowledging this conflict. In the meantime, let's listen in once again to what he had to say. Of course, we are looking at state banquets and tea meetings that are also being planned. There is a lot of FaceTime that the two leaders will have while being in China.
Gotten along. When there were difficulties, we worked it out. I would call you and you would call me, and whenever we had a problem, people don't know, whenever we had a problem, we worked that out very quickly. We're going to have a fantastic future together. Such respect for China, the job you've done. You're a great leader. I say it to everybody, you're a great leader.
Professor Singh, do you believe that such kind of statements that have come in from President Trump, because he's quite vocal, he's also very vocal when it comes to his criticism as well. But do you believe that the US delegation is actually looking forward for trade and good business as well? Because President Trump says it is going to be totally reciprocal on their behalf.
Definitely, with his popularity ratings down, his international standing as a global leader down, his petrol prices up, inflationary trends at home, he wants to clinch some deals, specific economic deals, whether it is beans or it is beef or it is Boeings. And that is what is driving this new language from President Trump in that sense, where he's praising President Xi Jinping. But for global markets, I think it sends a message of greater stability in bilateral relations. And that's a good sign in that sense. But President Xi Jinping also is fairly generous in his hosting. You saw the body language in the morning was fairly, when they were touching each other's elbows and making physical gestures, they looked relaxed.
Yes, he did not receive a big fat hug from President Xi.
Indeed, but that's very typical of Chinese, who are extremely sensitive to precision and grandeur of such protocol occasions. And I was, in fact, looking at the fact that President Trump, to put it politely, has not been so protocol conscious. If you notice his recent hosting of King Charles III or his visits to UK when he was kind of in a similar protocol situation with the Queen. But in this case, I think it went off fairly well, and in a very restrained fashion, both leaders still showed that they are relaxed with each other. In fact, I saw President Xi Jinping talking directly to President Trump during that welcome protocol without interpreters. And I think that was a kind of body language which was symbolizing a greater comfort.
I think there's a state banquet that's going to happen later in the day as well. But Mayank, what do you speak of that very measured response that has been coming in from the Chinese side? This is, a very cautious diplomacy, if we can say, coming in from President Xi.
Yes, certainly, because there's a long day and there are lots of things which are to be talked about and spoken about. And as very precisely described by Professor Singh, these things are, the Chinese have been very sensitive and measured. And this I can bring out with my own experience, because I had been part of one of the border personal meeting also. And there also it's very precise. The things are laid down to the precise seconds also. That's the way the things move when it comes to formal things and formal aspects is concerned. And these talks hold very, very important significance for the whole globe. Having said that, there are multiple other overhangs also, as we had been bringing out right from the beginning, which is Taiwan, which is West Asia, which is tariff. Lots of things are there. So having said that, let us wait for the day and the other day also, because lots of things will come out, and let it not be seen or viewed to be the marker of the complete meeting, because this is just the beginning.
So, Srinjoy, a reset in ties are we now looking at between US and China? Because this seems to be coming in from President Xi himself, saying that we have lots more, when it comes to common interests than differences.
Both sides stand to benefit if the ties improve, because even yesterday, our Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister said that China can speak to America and help to clear the Iranian problem. Now, both sides benefit if ties improve. Economically, strategically, America has pivoted towards the Southeast Asia in the past, the Indo-Pacific. And that pivot is something that happened because of Chinese aggression. Now, Chinese aggression has made American allies like Japan, like South Korea, like the Philippines feel insecure, particularly the Philippines insecure, also several other countries. Then there is the Taiwan issue. Now, if these things can be sorted out, I doubt if Taiwan can ever be sorted out, particularly in the short term. But if there is a sense of security for America's allies, if there is a sense that both sides can live in this world and function
I think we'll talk about what is the priority, because it seems that would be as far as lasting ceasefire in the Middle East, because it is not just when it comes to the directly conflicting parties that are being affected, but the world has been affected when it comes to the global consequences that we are looking of this prolonged conflict. So why does these talks actually matter? We're going to put out those pointers one by one, because President Trump here seems to be hoping that he can use, China's as Iran leverage. Of course, this is something that a so-called role of a mediator that Pakistan is also boasting to play, but there are questions being raised over its position as well. Then we can hope as far as China can act as an honest broker with Iran ties, because here is what US wants, pushing China to nudge Iran on the Strait of Hormuz. And to say to, the least, when it comes to all of these global leaders are now in India's neighborhood, and of course the Iranian foreign minister himself being here. So this is where, when the China factor comes into play, the very importance of the role of the Chinese is something that President Trump wants to leverage. Let's listen in once again.
Well, President Xi, I want to thank you very much. First of all, that was an honor like few have ever seen before. And I think I was particularly impressed by those children. They were happy. They were beautiful. The military is obvious. It couldn't be better, but those children were amazing, and they represent so much. And I know they represent so much to you. You and I have known each other now for a long time. In fact, the longest relationship of our two countries that any president and president has had. And that's, to me, an honor. We've had a fantastic relationship. We've gotten along. When there were difficulties, we worked it out. I would call you, and you would call me. And whenever we had a problem, people don't know, whenever we had a problem, we worked that out very quickly. We're going to have a fantastic future together. Such respect for China, the job you've done. You're a great leader. I say it to everybody. You're a great leader. Sometimes people don't like me saying it, but I say it anyway because it's true. I only say the truth. And I just want to say, on behalf of all of the great delegation that we have the greatest businessmen.
President Trump, I'm very pleased to meet you in Beijing. Welcome back to China after 9 years. The whole world is watching our meeting. Currently, transformation not seen in a century is accelerating across the globe, and the international situation is fluid and turbulent. The world has come to a new crossroads. Can China and the United States overcome the Thucydides trap and create a new paradigm of major country relations?
So a US-China reset on cards, the meetings that has been taking place, very crucial. Of course, there's a huge delegation of businessmen accompanying President Trump. We'll see how the day goes by. Thank you very much, Professor Singh, for your point of view, for joining us here on the broadcast. Enjoy, and Mayank, we'll reconnect. Thank you very much as well for joining in. And before we head into a short break, viewers, let's quickly talk about timesnownews.com, because here, when you log in, and as far as choose pickleball, and there you will get to see all of the updates that we are now looking at, especially when it comes to the game between the matches, how the pickleball tournaments are now being played off the court. And of course, when it comes to Kolkata Open, that seems to be showcasing a unique blend of competition and also community. So all of the updates you can watch, you can read if you log in to timesnownews.com. Not this, but much more that are lined up when we talk about India, world, and of course, global politics. In the meantime, we head into a very short break. You're watching the Morning News Hour.